Irene, would you tell us, is there a blood covenant also that keeps these women there besides their alleged freedom to leave and leave their children?
Well, we were taught a principle called blood atonement, and if a man can marry as many wives as he wants to, but if a woman has sexual intercourse with another man, she should be put to death. I mean, it said that she will be destroyed. And so women have to really toe the line and do whatever they say you can do. Well, a man can just have many wives, and if he wants to get a new one, anybody he can convince to be part of his family, why, he goes ahead and does it. Now, I actually had a brother-in-law, the Ervil LeBaron, that put this blood atonement into force. And that's what I wrote about in my book called Cult Insanity. I explained how he took this law, and because people wouldn't follow him, because he showed in the Bible, it said if you follow a false prophet, you should be put to death. Therefore, he figured my Uncle Rulon, who was a leader of the biggest polygamist group in Utah, Rulon Allred, he figured that he was a false prophet because he would not pay his tithing or subject himself to Ervil's orders, and therefore he sent his 13th wife in there and shot my uncle dead. My own husband lived in fear because Ervil had his brother Joel put to death, and my husband Verlin was hiding for at least 10 years all the time. We actually moved through Mexico and into Nicaragua, and I lived on dirt floors in Nicaragua, washed out in the creek like the Indians did, and I lived there to protect my children and myself from being put to death. When I came back, I actually went to my sister that lived in Las Vegas, and she actually moved to Humboldt County and got 2 homes, and her husband took me and put me in hiding that I might be able to protect my children and protect myself. No one will know the pain and the heartache that you go through when you look at these little children and every day wondering if they're going to be slaughtered, if somebody's going to come and kill your husband or kill you, and your children will be left homeless. So this religion is nothing except control. It is a cult. I do want to say here that the Mormon Church has nothing to do with the fundamentalists. They gave up polygamy in 1890 so that they would become a state. And but the fundamentalists showed by the scriptures, it said if you did not live polygamy, you couldn't become a god. And they didn't want to lose out. They felt like that they had to go ahead and do it to qualify for godhood. So they carry polygamy out at any cost. That's why today these men are willing to go to prison. They're willing to have their children taken away. Whatever happens, they are willing to do it because they are so convinced that they are God's chosen people and that they're doing God's work, and therefore they carry it on.
Are you indicating that Ervil LeBaron was not an isolated case in carrying out his belief in blood atonement?
Oh, no, it was not an isolated case. Most of the groups believe in it. And you take the Lafferty brothers in Provo, Utah, here a few years ago. They went in and actually slit their sister-in-law's throat, and her little baby in the crib slit its throat because she didn't want to give her husband a wife and follow him explicitly. She rebelled against it. Also, they have back in the reorganized church, Jeffrey Lundgren, that they would claim to be a prophet, and he took other men's wives away from them. It was just nothing but a controlled system, and those that didn't give everything they had, turn it over to him, were going to receive the consequences. He actually had a family of 5 murdered, took them one by one out into the barn and killed them and threw them in a pit that they had dug into the barn. Many people actually believe that if they have sinned, that they should go to the brethren and tell them what they've done so that their lives might be taken, because they believe that by taking your life you are saved in heaven. They teach us that Jesus Christ did not pay for our sins. No way did he do it. Each one of us has to pay for our own sins. And how do we do it? We do it through blood atonement.
Then are there many different names of these groups, or is it just one group under one title? How does that work?
Oh no, they have the Church of the Lamb of God, the Church of the Firstborn, the United Apostolic Brethren, the Zion Church, this, that. They have, I know, about 15 different churches, but what they do, they all believe basically the same thing. And when there's problem in one little group, the others say, oh, that has nothing to do with us. We have nothing to do with that. But it isn't. They're all intertwined. They're intermarried. And the sad thing about it, even today, because of these close-knit groups, they're marrying cousins. I had two nephews, Ervil's sons, that actually, one of his sons took actually 4 of his sisters, his half-sisters, and took them to wife because they were in such sheltered things and couldn't have any outside access to get women. They married their own sisters. And in the I know another group up in Salt Lake, and the Kingston group, where they are marrying half-sisters. And this interbreeding needs to quit, or we're going to have a lot of strange people stranger people before this thing is over. And it really saddens me that even with the women, the prophet usually says that he has a revelation from God, and it's so convenient for him to have the revelation, because I noticed he took all the beautiful women and beautiful young girls, and those that had to go out and work, they sent all the young boys out to work for 2 years, and they would give their money to the prophet to support him and his wives. And if they were good enough, then they got blessed by being given a wife. But I noticed that the obese, those that were retarded, those that were not beautiful, those that, anyway, the leftovers, they gave to these men for just rewards. I knew one guy that absolutely cried and cried when they said, hey, you're getting married tonight. You're marrying this girl. Come over to my office and I'll marry her to you, seal her to you for time and eternity because of the good job you've done. He said he went over and he said, when I saw my 300-pound bride, I wanted to weep and wondered what I had done that God would put me through this. The thing that is sad about this religion is they throw a cloak over crimes. And there's many in all of these groups. I know of incest. I know there's been many cases where fathers have had sexual relations with their own daughters, one to the tune of 21 daughters. And what do when they find out about this? They don't send him to jail. They take those girls away and marry them off to men old enough to be their fathers and their grandfathers. They just get them out of the house and marry them to someone else.
Do they always get them out, or if just somebody complains?
Well, they don't always get them out. Many of them live right up until the time it is with incest going on in the house, and it's really sad. I myself know of about 7 different cases where men were having relations with their own daughters, and they don't go to the law. They try to take care of it with the priesthood brethren. And I know people say, I know one woman, the priesthood brethren told her to go back and just lock the door at night, and so she would keep all the young girls in her bedroom and lock him out so that she could protect them. And she had to live underneath that because he was a priesthood brother. Also, in many of these groups, if the men don't toe the line with the prophet, they will actually take your wives and your children away. I know many cases where a man has come home after being out working somewhere on a job somewhere, and he will come home and the wives won't talk to him, and they say, hey, we've been given to your brother, or we've been given to somebody else. We are no longer married to you. And they have just broken the hearts of many women, broken the hearts of many children by passing him around from one situation to the other. I say that all of us women were nothing but pawns in the game of polygamy. And we were the breeding stock that kept these movements expanding and alive. I feel that because of the pain and the heartache that I went through, people say, well, what brought you to that point, Irene, that you decided to get out? Well, when you want to commit suicide, and when you've had a nervous breakdown, when I saw 9 of my nieces and nephews and one first cousin commit suicide, I had one sister-in-law that had 4 of her children, 2 daughters and 2 sons, that committed suicide. And when you see the pain and the heartache, you know, the Bible should be good news. They always told, oh, the Bible is good news. It certainly wasn't good news to me. You call this good news? Got to give a wife to your another wife to your husband, and they bring them home, and you get less and less and less. You become so hopeless and in such despair that you have no reason to live. Then I know a few women that have had nervous breakdowns, and what do? They go ahead and they take those children away, take the mother away, and say that she's crazy and put her away in a nut house, and the man keeps the children. And in several cases, the state, if a young girl has even run away because she can't take it, the state has made her go back home. Where is the justice in this? I'm speaking out because I want people to know that no longer will I sit by and see people live in slavery. No longer will I see them live in ignorance. No longer will I see them have to have all these children and the despair and what they are going through happen. And the only way that I ever came to realize that I couldn't put up with that anymore is I was afraid I was going to go to hell. But I looked around one day and I realized that they could not threaten me anymore. There was no way they could threaten me with hell because I realized that I was already there.
There's some talk that people can actually find the reality of the news clips on some of these things on the internet. Is that correct?
Oh yes, you can go on the internet and look up Ervil LeBaron. You can look up fundamentalists. We believe that Adam was God, and the Mormon Church taught for years that Adam was God, and you can look that up on the internet. There's so many things that people really don't know what original Mormonism was all about. If you get in and really see what it's all about, it gives you a whole different view than what it is today.
Were Tom Green and Ross LeBaron in any way tied in with any of these groups that you know?
This Tom Green that was arrested and spent time in Utah State Prison was actually married to 2 of my nieces. He married my one niece, and she had a baby when she was 14 years old. And he was so much older than her, and they brainwash you that they're going to be a god. And, you know, some young girl, oh, I get to be a goddess. It's like playing house, you know. You're going to be a goddess, and he's going to become a god. But he married both of them. Then he turned around and married 2 of his wives' mothers besides, so he's married to the mothers and the daughters. And I actually know of one case that always saddened me, that a man married a divorcee, and 2 weeks after he married her 9 and 11-year-old daughters. When you see that women don't value, they don't value at all. I didn't believe that I valued. And the time came when I had to start loving myself. I was so needy. I was out there hoping that the brethren would love me, hoping that my husband would love me, hoping that somebody would help me. And you have to come to the point where you have to learn to love yourself and get your own identity back and stand on your own 2 feet. What good does it do for you to turn your life over to somebody and let them run it in a ditch, and then you sit and cry and say, look what they've done to me? We allowed it. But the thing of it is, it's all so controlled by fear. I was actually petrified where I could hardly move. I had panic attacks because I couldn't hardly cope with what I was going through.
Are you indicating then that these organizations are held together by fear more than faith?
Oh, absolutely. It's absolutely fear. I think many people have lost their faith seeing what's happened, you know. Absolutely. It's fear.
I want to tell our audience that's listening in that this woman you are hearing speak is Irene Spencer, a New York Times best-selling author of Shattered Dreams and Cult Insanity. Shattered Dreams is her New York Times best-selling book, and Cult Insanity. So she must raise them up by her faces. She's going to see it on this camera. So